and welcome to lesson 6.8. And lesson 6.8 is on how do we add and subtract fractions. Now, fractions with common denominators, which of course is our bottom number of a fraction, are really easy to add or subtract because they're the same. But in this lesson, we're going to talk about how we can add and subtract fractions with coming up with common denominators if they're not there already. So let's get started. It says mental math. Mental math and word problems. We're going to talk about mixed operations. So here we go. Let's get started. There we go. Now it's loading. I was waiting. All right, here we go. And our IXL kind of takes a little time to load, so I apologize. It says each of Farmer Romero's 5,746 lambs is either black or white. There are 613 white ones. How many of Farmer Romero's lambs are black? Okay, first of all, you need to think about what is the question asking me. And what it is asking us is how many of his lambs are black. And how do I figure out the problem? I know how many white ones there are, so in order to figure that out, I'm going to need to use adding and subtraction. And because I know the total number of lambs, which is 5,746, hopefully you're all saying in your head, I need to subtract the number of lambs that are white. And if I do that, I would end up with 5,133 lambs that are black. So let's see how we did. Perfect. So it's a group of 9,882 students is going on a rafting trip. If the raft holds 9 students, how many rafts will the students need? So again, we're looking at the number of rafts, and it says if each raft holds 9 students, how many rafts are we going to need? Now here's another thing to think about with this one. Remember, if you were that student that's waiting for a raft, are you going to need to make sure that you round up or down, or does it come out evenly? Well, when I divide in 9,882 by 9, I got 1,098 rafts. So let's see how we did there. And again, we got it right. So this is the last one I want you to do. I actually want you to bring this one in as part of your homework. So this will be homework piece number 1. It says there were 3,121 residents in Stamford when developers started building a strip mall and business park. Now Stamford has grown by 2,757 residents. How many residents now live in the city? Okay, again, it's asking how many residents live there. And so hopefully you know what you need to do with those two numbers. Okay, let's get back to our lesson. Remember, write down your problem, actually write down the numbers and do the work. And then make sure you label it with residents, I'm hoping, correct? All right, let's get back to our lesson. Okay, so now it says math message. How do we add and subtract fractions? Well, with this one, we had 3/4 plus 3/4. Now, when I am doing a problem, and I like to have my pen here, but when I'm doing a problem, I really like to do it like this. Oh, and my writing's going to be not so great because I forgot my airliner at school. But I like to line them up this way instead of like this because it's easier for me to see it when I do it this way. And I add numbers, in a column anyways. So now if I do this, I'm going to click off of it for just a second because I want to scroll down. I can go ahead and add them together because I know that my bottom number is the same. And so I know that 3 plus 3 is 6, so I'm going to have 6/4. Now the problem with 6/4 is that it is an improper fraction, and hopefully you know that. So we have to divide 4 into 6. So 4 goes into 6 to get rid of that, right? And I'm going to do like this. And so 4 goes into 6 one time. And I put my 1 up. And I subtract my 4, so subtract 4. And I would end up with a remainder of 2. Hopefully you know that. And I have 2 down here. Ooh, 2. So I'd have 1 2/4 or 1 1/2 because I know 2/4 rounds to a half. And hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, so then with this problem, again, I would move my 6/8 down here. And I'm going to put that here. And I'm going to add, because I like it to be vertical. Okay, and again, I'm writing over my words and I apologize. Oops, and that didn't work out so good, but that's okay. So 5 plus 6 is 11, and that's 11 over 8. Okay, now I also have a whole number over here that I also need. So I have 1 and 11/8. Again, problem. 8 into 11, and I want to divide it. And this is where the whole number is going to come into play here because it will change. So I know that 8 goes into 11 one time. I'm going to put 8 underneath here, and I'm going to subtract it. 11 minus 8 is 3. So I have, oops, I apologize here, like I said, okay, so I have 1 and 3/8. And here is where my whole number will change. Because now I add my whole number here to this whole number. And that changes my answer, my final answer, to 2 and 3/8. Now hopefully that somewhat makes sense. I kind of did it fast, so hopefully it makes sense. But when you get another whole number, you still have to add it to your whole numbers, your column here, okay? When you have an improper fraction, many times you end up with a whole number and a fraction. So just remember that as you're working through some of these. Okay, let's keep moving. Here's some more to add. So it says finding a common denominator to add and subtract fractions. Now one thing to remember is, could one of my numbers that is already there, one of my denominators, be my common denominator? And the answer is yes, okay? So the first thing I do again is I move this because I have to line them up this way so it makes sense. Okay, so I get rid of my 1/4. Now, can 4 go into 2 or 2 into 4? Well, I know a bigger number cannot go into a smaller number, but I do know that 2 can go into 4, so I'm going to make this 1/4 because that's not going to change because 4 is going to be my common denominator. How do I get 4? If I multiply 2 times 2, I know that will give me 4, and if I do it on the bottom, I also have to do it on top to my numerator. So now, if I add these, I end up with 2 over 4. And now I can add them because I have the same denominator. So let's add. 2 plus 1 is 3. And my denominator did not change, so my answer would be 3 over 4 or 3/4. Okay, so write in your answer of 3 over 4. And hopefully that's made some sense to you. Now number 2 should be fairly easy because again you have a common denominator. So please write that one in and bring it in tomorrow. Now here's an interesting one. I have 2½ plus 3. 3 doesn't have a fraction. Again, that should be quite easy. Now on number 4, here is the one that you're going to write 3 and 3/4 over here. Now the part I deal with when I have whole numbers and fractions is I deal with my fraction piece first. And I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need that right now. So look at your fraction. I have a 4 and I have an 8. Well, I know 4 can go into 8, so I'm going to multiply down here. And I'm going to deal with my fraction first. And I know 4 times 2 is 8. And I also know then 3 times 2 is 6. Same thing on the bottom as on the top. So I now have 6/8. Okay, and I still have my 3. Don't do anything with your 3. So I still have 5/8 over here. I'm going to use my fraction first. 5 over 8 and 6 over 8. Now, 5 plus 6 is 11. Here's where I don't want to do anything with my whole number yet, because that whole number is going to change because I have an improper fraction. So I want to divide 8 into 11. Oops, and I apologize, this is really not so great. And I know that 8 goes into 11 one time. 11 minus 8 is 3 again. So I have 3/8, which is my fraction piece. But again, here's where my 1 needs to go back over to my whole numbers. So I'm going to write a 1 here. So now I do 3 plus 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. And what is my fraction piece that I was left with over here? Well, that was 3 over 8 because I had an improper fraction. Oops, excuse me. So my new number should be 7 and 3/8. Hopefully you were able to follow that with me. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so bring in your answers to 2 and 3. Let's keep moving, and we will practice this more in class as well. Just remember, common denominators when you do not have denominators that are the same. All right, so let's go back to our last page. which again, we're adding and we're subtracting. So I am not going to do anything with the first one, number 5. You do that one on your own. And now I have 7/8 and I have, oops, sorry, and 3/8. That one is very easy. You're just subtracting them. Good news again with that one, common denominator. Okay, again, I also have number 7, 5 3/4 minus 2 1/4. Same type of a problem there, common denominators. But then we come to number 8, which is not a common denominator, so I would work through it by moving first 4 5/8 over here, because I want it lined up, because that's important to me. All right, 4 5/8, okay, and I'm going to cross it off there. Now, I know that 8 is going to be my common denominator because I know 2 can go into 8. So I would do 4 there. All right, times 4 times 4. All right, so here, now I have 4/8 and 5/8. 4/8 over here and 5/8. Problem. What is my problem? I have a smaller number on top. I cannot take 4 from 5. So I need to borrow, okay? I need to borrow from my whole number, all right? So in order to do that, I'm going to have to borrow. And this is how I do it. So now I have 4 5/8, and now I have 7 4/8, okay? So down here I do this. So on this one, in order for me to do that, I have to borrow from here, okay? And now I add these to make a whole. So now I have 12 over 8, because 8 plus 4 is 12. So 12 over 8, okay? And now I can subtract again my 5/8 because it's bigger than the 5. So now I know that 12 minus 5 is 7. And so I have 7 over 8, and I'm sorry, this is not lined up perfectly. Okay, but I can't leave it with just 7/8. I also now have to go over and do my whole numbers. And I borrowed, so now I'm with 6, and I can subtract 6 from 4, and that would give me 2. So my answer should be 2 7/8. Okay, again, we'll go over this in class in case it doesn't make sense to you. All right, but hopefully it's starting to make sense, and we'll spend more time on this as well. So let's go back to our objective and see how we did. How do we add and subtract fractions? Okay, and we did do some of that with like denominators, which makes it very easy, and then with unlike denominators. Let's review. On this, you had one problem to do that you needed to bring in, okay? Then we talked about adding fractions and how we did those. On this page, you needed to do number 2 and number 3, and they should be quite easy. And then on our last page, or page 5, the one we did together was 8, so you need to bring in the 5, 6, and 7. So it's a total of like 5 problems. Oh, I was yawning. I apologize for that. So bring in those problems. I'm going to do a little quiz for you to practice with denominators, so make sure you complete that as well. As always, have a great evening.